Agatha All Along, aka Agatha House of Harkness, aka Agatha Darkhold Diaries, aka Agatha Coven of Chaos, has finally wrapped up, and it originally interested me by exploring a brand new corner of the MCU, witches and dark magic. But it was also the sequel of WandaVision that no one really asked for, and now that I've seen all 9 episodes, it's safe to say I still don't know why this show exists. Agatha All Along follows Agatha Harkness as she's freed from a spell by a mysterious teenager who convinces her to join him on the Witch's Road, a magical gauntlet of trials that can restore a witch's power. I do want to give a spoiler warning, as I will be talking about all of the story and character details near the end of the video. Right at the gate, I have to say this is a pretty creatively interesting series. I'm a big fan of WandaVision, and their light exploration of covens and witches was really intriguing to me, but I never really needed this show. 9 30-minute episodes for a side character in the first Marvel Disney Plus TV show. No one really asked for this, but we still got it. And to me, the fact that there are musical numbers in pretty much every single episode just means that they're trying to replicate that ounce of success that Agatha had in WandaVision and just trying to expand it into as much content as possible. But with that being said, there is a fan base. There are people that enjoy the darker, magical side of the MCU, and I do enjoy the magical side, which I'll talk about in just a second here, but I think they explore it well enough for what they can do, with Agatha being a side character of a side character's story. Similarly to how the first Doctor Strange film explored this aspect of magic for the first time, at least in depth in the MCU, this is a whole new side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I'm just not a part of the fans who wanted this because this series just feels too little too late. Now, this isn't to say every MCU project is a necessity, because in my opinion, there's things like Miss Marvel and Hawkeye, etc. They're just not things I asked for, but they win me over time, and this didn't do any of that. If anything, it kind of lost me as the series went on, because it made this whole aspect less and less interesting, less and less urgent, because of all of the characters that we were introduced to but didn't really care about. Now, before I start on this show more and more, I want to talk about one of the most interesting parts of the series though, and that is the very intriguing production of it. There are so many practical sets, demon costumes, blood, etc. Episode 7 has this sword drop room, and it is executed very well. I also think they take a really great, fantastical, but also grounded and practical look at the Witch's Road, and the way that the CG and practical effects are blended is really cool, making everything feel extraterrestrial, but also like you can grab it. But at the same time, a lot of the practicality does make the entire series look very cheap, and that's kind of the vibe that WandaVision was going for, but it's because it's a sitcom. It's supposed to look like it's all practical in there, whereas The Witch's Road feels like something a little bit more out there to me, so I don't necessarily think the overall practical efforts kind of ended the best they could have. Back to what I was saying about too little too late, I genuinely do think that if this series had come out a year after WandaVision and they had planned this series to be adjacent to WandaVision from the get-go, like from before WandaVision was even made, I think the characters could have been way more interesting, and the story in general just could have been much more urgent. The biggest flaw of this series is the fact that it's a coven of witches trying to accomplish something, but literally every single character is just absolutely uninteresting. The whole motivation of these witches' lives is because they're being forgotten or they're power hungry. There's just nothing interesting about it because we have no context on them. We have one episode where they're like, oh, we read tarot cards and that's all we do with our life now. Like, I don't give a shit. And on top of this, all of the performances just feel absolutely irrelevant. None of them are doing anything interesting. There's just a couple to mention, but nothing that really blew me away. For starters, I want to talk about Teen, which might be the laziest character name I've ever heard in my entire life. Teen is played by Joe Locke, and he's basically given his own backstory episode that really does connect WandaVision and Agatha All Along, and I think the connection itself is really interesting, but the character does little to nothing from episode 1 through 5, so I just didn't really care once we got to episode 6 where we heard his backstory.
If you really want to finish this together, just know that I do not trust you at all.
What the hell?
Like this whole Billy reincarnation thing, like boo-hoo, it didn't matter to me. I also didn't care about Billy in the WandaVision series, and so you're just making me more and more uninterested in everything that's going on. Out of the entire coven, I think Lila Calderu has probably the most interesting subplot. It's about morality and death and stuff like that. It's primarily prominent in episode 7, which I do think is pretty much the best episode of the series. And then we have Aubrey Plaza as Lady Death, whose twist was really interesting, and I was like, whoa, okay, cool, where do we go from from here. And then they don't really do much with it as the series goes on in the final 2 episodes. I just needed way more Aubrey Plaza in this series, and her chemistry with Catherine Hahn was at least humorous while it was on screen. I also think the whole catalytic factor of the series, and from the first episode, she's literally like, let me live, like I'll make it worth your while.
Don't you want me at my best? Let me get my purple back. And then come find me.
And then obviously we have our lead, Agatha Harkness, played by Catherine Hahn. And I think that she's good, but I think Agatha just works so much better as a supporting character. And her in WandaVision is miles ahead of her in this series because there's just little to no context added to her character. We really, at least, okay, we get context, but it's not interesting context. They focus on this coven of witches and their whole entire plot against Agatha. The entire series is just, she's power hungry. She killed her own son for power, blah, blah, blah. We don't care because we've never known any of this before this series, and it's supposed to be like a tail end to WandaVision. Catherine Hahn is good, but Aubrey Plaza is just Aubrey Plaza, which makes it funny. My biggest flaw for Agatha All Along is just the fact that a lot of the plots are borderline boring. The plot A, plot B, plot C, everything just keeps on going and you're like, when are we gonna get something good? Consistently throughout the entire series, the only plot that slightly works is the whole teenager mystery, but you could kind of already tell who he was from the second episode. But at most, he has 2 episodes that he's leading. And in those 2 episodes, you're not even focusing on the Coven, which is the main group of characters. You're focusing on Billy himself, which is why I'm like, why did we even do the whole Coven thing? And episode 6 to me is easily my favorite of the series, but it's because it feels the most closely related to WandaVision. I also think the whole death plot is kind of stupid. It wasn't necessarily bad, but it wasn't even a twist. There's no impact on this whole witch group. I think they're called the 7 or something like that, and then death as well. None of it is built up to be terrifying. You don't really know what they're capable of other than 3 or 4 flashback sequences. None of this has been built up over any amount of time, and they spend time focusing on the wrong things. To me, it doesn't matter that members of the Coven have died off to all of these different trials that the witches are going through to gain more power, because I never really cared for them in the first place. They were just mindless side characters in WandaVision. Everything feels so lackluster. Everything feels so shoehorned in. It just feels like we're plucking little things from WandaVision and kind of being like, okay guys, let's put this in Agatha because it was in WandaVision, and that's what the whole story was based off of. At the end of the day, Agatha All Along is interesting for the 15 people that asked for this series. For everyone else, it does nothing enough to explore further than WandaVision or even the Coven and dark magic side that WandaVision introduced. Overall, I'm gonna give Agatha All Along a 5 out of 10. Let me know what you guys thought of Agatha All Along in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.